Thank you, Madam Chair. We really come down to some pretty stark choices here. And I'd like to ask you, Professor Eastman and Professor Ting, while seated at a table with an undocumented person, some would even call illegal person, we have three choices. And I'd like you to tell me which one you choose. The choices are, number one, stick with the current way we're doing things. Agree with the House of Representatives. We don't have to do anything. Leave the system as it is. Don't deport people, just leave them where they are. Then we had the suggestion by presidential candidate Mitt Romney, self-deportation. Let's tell these people to leave. All 11 million of them, just leave. Or the president's approach, create some priorities here. Say to people, if you want to stay in this country and you're undocumented, you've got to come forward and register. You have to submit yourself to a criminal background check, and you have to pay taxes for a temporary situation where you can work in this country. So which of those three do you choose?
Senator, the underlying question is, given the fact that we admire and respect immigrants, how many immigrants do we want to come to the United States every year? Does it matter? If it doesn't matter, we can save $18 billion a year and just not enforce immigration laws.
Excuse me, Professor, the executive order does not leave the gates open. The executive order closed the gates 5 years ago. 5 years ago. So this notion of a flood of new immigrants, that's not what the executive order says.
We need to decide what we want. Once we decide what we want, then we can decide which policies are the best way to get us to where we want. Are we prepared to accept unlimited immigration to the United States, or do we want to enforce a limit? That's the question.
You've gone to the extreme again.
No, it's about the numbers.
It's not unlimited. The president's executive order has a limitation, as did the comprehensive immigration bill. And Mr. Ting, you said in your testimony, and I will add, as the son of an immigrant, thank God that this is a nation of immigrants, so you and I have a chance to sit here in the United States Senate and debate this issue. Let's never forget that this is a nation of immigrants. And they've made it a great nation, and you and I are damn lucky it is.
I teach immigration law every week. I'm well aware of the history of the immigration system in the United States, and I'm well aware of the role that my parents played in coming to the United States at a time of Chinese exclusion.
And Senator, you said this is a nation of immigrants. That's true. It's also a nation of laws. And the question, the underlying assumption of your question is choosing an option that ignores those laws. The Constitution is.
So which option do you choose? You have three.
The option that you selected of the president's policy is one that ignores the laws that this body.
Wait a minute. Now that leaves you two options. Okay, which one do you choose?
Well, the other
current situation or mass deportation.
The current situation is not one of non-enforcement. The law says the law has mandatory Section 252, for example, specifies that people who are not able to demonstrate a lawful presence in the United States shall have removal proceedings initiated against them.
So you would take the Romney approach. Let's deport all these people.
Well, Senator, this body is the one that sets the law. If you think that is true draconian, then this body ought to change the law. But the notion that the executive can unilaterally suspend the law is not part of the constitutional system we, the people, agreed to live under when it was adopted.
Your position is the Romney deportation. Enforce the law.
No, my position is to enforce the law that's on the books until the Congress, which has the authority to change it, changes that law. But otherwise, we live in a lawless society. And Professor Ting's claim that if it's lawless, you will be opening the doors to an innumerable amount of people to come here because we've already demonstrated no willingness to enforce the law.
So
and we saw that happen on the southern border in Texas.
You were saying enforce the law, deport the 11 million. That's your position.
I'm saying enforce the law until Congress changes it. Yes, Senator.
Well, I can tell you, if you think that we can deport 11 million people without dramatic negative impacts on individuals, families, and our economy, then I don't believe you're in the world of reality.
Then change the law, Senator, but don't do it by executive fiat. That's the question.
In the United States Senate, the House refused to act. Now
the House had a number of bills that it sent up here that you refused to act on.
Well, give me an example of one on immigration.
Senator,
There was a STEM jobs bill that passed in the House that was sent here, and it died, even though everyone says they're for STEM jobs.
That doesn't, it certainly doesn't address all but a part of...
No, but it's a bill that dealt with immigration, which is what you asked. And they sent it up here. You have a disagreement between this body and the other body. But the notion that the president can unilaterally change the law at his will is no part of our constitutional system. That's the issue we're dealing with.
So the 11 presidents who've done this before him over a period of 60 years were all in violation of the law?
No, they were not. And let me go through that. I'm glad you asked because it's significant. President Eisenhower, President Kennedy, President Reagan all did this in dealing with their Article II powers or foreign affairs to deal with international humanitarian crises. That's not what the president here has done, and
what about President Bush's order?
President Bush, you weren't here when I read it, but the President Bush acted pursuant to a specific statutory authority that gave explicit discretion to the Attorney General. No such statutory exists here. Those are dramatically different things if we're going to stick with the law that's on the books.
I think you're being selective in the way you read this. And I would just tell you this. Prosecutorial discretion is part of the executive authority. You have come out in favor of mass deportation. I don't think that it's reasonable, and I don't think it's good for this country. I also accept your challenge to do something. We did. With a vote of 68 in favor, 14 Republicans, we passed comprehensive immigration reform. House of Representatives refused to call it or any part of it. And now you're telling us, well, let's leave the situation as it is or deport everyone who's here. Those are not acceptable alternatives.
Neither is the president doing it on his own.
What the president has done is to make this a safer nation by putting more resources on the border, putting a limitation on those who are eligible to come forward, register, submit to a criminal background check, and pay their taxes in America to work on a temporary basis. That, to me, is a reasonable response to the House's failure to act when we pass this legislation.
Senator, you said it's safer. I challenge you to go down to the border states of people that are dealing with the massive influx, the humanitarian crisis that were a direct result of the president's lawlessness on the DACA program.
Well,
people came here thinking that they had a free ticket.
With all due respect, Professor Eastman, read the law. What the president said in DACA affecting Astrid Silva had a limitation and deadline on eligibility. Don't blame the president for what happened at the border.
Well, everybody in Central America thought that this was the ticket to salvation. And they came here and said, under DACA, I'm coming. It's a humanitarian crisis down there that this thing created.
If you read the law, you know that's not true.
It didn't cause it
Thank you, gentlemen.
by law.